So I'm going to introduce you to who will be having the conversation with Chief Acevedo. So our first one is Clemente Nicado. Clemente Nicado, un cubano journalist with a tremendous passion for journalism. There's nobody that I have met more passionate than Clemente. Clemente publishes Negocios now, has had many recognitions, and in 2018, he was recognized as the Publisher of the Year Award by the NAHP, the National Association of Hispanic Publications. Clemente was hired by the Chicago Tribune in 2003 to launch Hoy, the Chicago's first daily Hispanic newspaper. 4 years later, he founded Nicado Publishing Company and launched Negocios Now, a national award-winning publication focused on Hispanic entrepreneurs. Negocios Now received the Peter Listiger Award for General Excellence from Chicago Headline Club. Nicado is a former international correspondent with 30 years of experience in journalism. He worked in Latin America news agency for 10 years, covering a wide of issues spanning from the economy, trade, policy, safety, elections, Olympic Games. Nicado also recently launched, well, he has launched a Hispanic news agency, that was a little older, but he recently launched El Chicago Hispano, and also carsenespañol.com, El Viajero Latino, and he's the author of Así Lo Hicieron, a 2012 book featuring profiles of outstanding Hispanic business people in Chicago. He publishes and does Chicago Who's Who. It was a great gala and a special event. And he also puts a special edition for Latinos 40 and under, Latinos 40 under 40. He's a great friend of mine, and I have known him for years, and I always love his passion. You know, tiene pasión cubana for sure. And then we have Christy. Christy Martinez-Garcia, and Christy is in Texas. She attended Texas Tech University and was named the Ronald E. McNair Scholar in 1997. She received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Public Relations and Marketing and attended the graduate school at Texas Tech, as well as Wayland Baptist University. Christy, a Lubbock native, developed her professional skills working in city government, private business, and the nonprofit industry. She's worked for the National Council of La Raza in Washington, D.C., Assistant Director of Public Information, overseeing national media activities. Ms. Martinez is the publisher and owner of Latino Lubbock magazine, which averages about 100,000 monthly readers and can be found in Lubbock and 28 rural communities. She created the publication in She created the publication in 2016 to centralize bilingual information as a tool for dialogue and understanding for Lubbock in 2019. She was selected as Latina Publisher of the Year nationally last year by NAHP. Latino Lubbock magazine will celebrate their 50th year anniversary of printing in January 2020, she did, and is developing the digital presence of her publication. She also does PR marketing consulting and specializing in the Latino market. I think I got it all right. So if we could let Christy we're gonna do the video before they come in. So go ahead, if we could play the video. So it is really my pleasure to present our guests, a special guest, Art Acevedo, Chief Acevedo, and I'm just going to briefly go over his bio. He has a terrific bio. Art Acevedo is currently the Chief of Police for the Houston Police Department in Texas and was appointed by the Mayor Sylvester Turner. He was sworn into office on November 30th, 2016, and leads a department of 5,300 sworn law enforcement officers and 892 civilian support personnel in the fourth largest city in the United States that has 671 square miles and an annual general fund budget of $899 million. Chief Acevedo firmly believes that good two-way communication is vital for successful community and stability works to strengthen the bond between the community and its police department. As a proponent of community policing, Chief Acevedo refers to the proven practice as relational policing, which is an opportunity to form a relationship with each and every person a department member comes in contact with. He also subscribes to law enforcement being a data-driven, intelligence-led process that is well suited to a policing professional in the 21st century. As the first Hispanic to lead Houston Police Department, Chief Acevedo brings a unique understanding to the concerns of the diverse community in Houston. Born in Cuba, he was 4 years old when he immigrated to the United States with his family in 1968. Acevedo subsequently grew up in California and earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Public Administration from the University of Lubbock in California. Acevedo, muchas gracias por estar aquí, bienvenido. Lo dejo con dos awesome publishers, Christy y Clemente. Gracias.
Gracias. Buen día.
Welcome to the NAHP Virtually Everywhere 2020 virtual conference. The National Association of Hispanic Publications, Inc. is a nonpartisan trade advocacy organization representing the leading Spanish language publications, serving 41 markets in 39 states, including the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico.
Wow.
With a combined circulation of over 23 million. My name's Christy Martinez-Garcia, obviously not Clemente. I'm the publisher of Latino Lubbock magazine in Lubbock, Texas, your home state. Bienvenidos. And in addition, I want to welcome our colleague, Clemente Nicado. He's the publisher of Negocios now in Chicago, Illinois. And with that, let's welcome Police Chief Acevedo of Houston, Texas, and begin our session with the first question by Clemente.
Un cubano para sentirse orgulloso.
Somos pocos.
No, somos muy pocos, no, pero bueno, es from Cuba to Chief Police Officer in Houston. What an amazing journey. Uber Arturo Acevedo, jefe de la policía de Houston. Thank you very much. Gracias very much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I understand your father was a police officer in Cuba. Is that what inspired you to become an officer?
You know, the United States gave my family the greatest gift of all, which is freedom. And el viejo mío, you know, he told us growing up, oye, aquí hay que echar pa'lante. You know, you got to forge ahead. And so we were raised really to love this country. We love the United States, as imperfect as it is. And right now it's crazier than it's ever been, but I think there's better tomorrows. And growing up, I either wanted to go to West Point or become a police officer. And I didn't get my citizenship in time to go to West Point. So I quit law school halfway through my second semester, my first year. And I've never looked back. Love the profession. I think that we've come a long way in the 34 years I've been a policeman, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And it goes well beyond law enforcement. It's actually societal work that needs to get done. And we're just the most visible part of that. So, but here I am, and thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on with a lot of Latino and Hispanic publishers and everyone else that may be on.
Chief Acevedo, I'm not Cuban, I'm a Tejana.
So am I.
No, but I have been to Cuba a couple of times and I love it. So, but let's get started. So law enforcement personnel across the nation today are facing some really complex challenges. And knowing what it's like to serve on patrol and the current situation for police, as a police chief, are you encouraging your officers while easing the pressure of their roles and maintaining the integrity of the shield?
You know what's I always like to tell my officers with challenges come opportunities. They should look at them as an opportunity to really take the profession to the next level. And so what we tell them is, look, the majority of the community still knows that the majority of police officers are good. This is the most diverse big city in the country, in Houston, and they get to see just how much support they have in this community. So I tell them it's incumbent upon them to understand that history is watching and recording everything they do, everything they say, but especially for leaders, they're recording everything we do and say, but also what we fail to do and say. So I always tell them just to go out, do your job, stand up for what you know is right, remember your oath of office, and understand that the communities that need us most are the communities impacted by crime the most, and that's communities of color. And consequently, because they need us so much, they actually do support us a lot, and they should never listen to all the noise and think the communities of color don't support them, because the truth of the matter is it's the communities that support us the most. So, you know, I think we're at a crossroads in our nation's history, but again, it goes well beyond policing, and we're just the most visible cog. We need to speak out.
So you were the first Hispanic police chief in Houston.
Yeah.
What has been the reaction of your police force and the community, and what have been your challenges?
Well, I think I was also the first Latino Hispanic in Austin, and the first one here. I take that responsibility very seriously, because it took, you know, 100 years in Austin and 100 years here to get a Latino or Hispanic. And I feel like if I mess it up, it'll be another 100 years before we have another Latino or Hispanic here. And I can just tell you that what I love about this city in Houston is that it's a big melting pot, and people here look beyond the color of somebody's skin. People here look beyond their nation of origin. People here look beyond the stereotypes that we might have of one another. And what they look at is, what does this chief stand for? What does he do? What does he do with the authority and the visibility that the job gives him? And I love the fact that I have, you know, I still work patrol. I go out in a black and white in a police car by myself, middle of the night. Nobody knows who's in there. And I just love that no matter where we go in the city, I have white people, black people, brown people, Asians. They'll come up and thank me for the job that we're doing as a police department. And I think that what people want, what people are showing here is that diversity is actually a strength in this city. And what people are judging me by is not the fact whether I'm a Hispanic or Latino or the first, is what are you doing? Do you care? Are you visible? Are you actually weighing in and actually doing your job instead of trying to keep your job? And so far, I can tell you that we've been having a good time here in Houston with the community.
Chief, just to let you know, I did diversity training for the Lubbock Police Department. I also had the privilege of doing the Citizens Police Academy twice. So I appreciate everything that you guys do. But in a time where the POTUS has weaponized law enforcement, what steps are police, or as a police chief, are you taking to maintain nonpartisan politics and balance to fit the needs of those that you serve and the growing concerns between law enforcement agencies and marginalized communities?
Yeah, it's challenging because, you know, 45 there likes to, he was just joking about how great it was that Al Velci was hit by a rubber bullet. You know, he's a reporter, anchor for MSNBC, or joking about you need to rough up prisoners, and or grateful that supporters went into Portland, the caravan to Portland that we know led to violence. And, you know, if you're going to support the police and say you're pro-law enforcement, well, you need to conduct yourself in a way when police officers and community members are getting hurt, property is being destroyed, people are getting shot, people are getting hit in the head with bricks, or gas is being deployed across our country. You know, leadership is about looking for peace and reconciliation, not for, you know, law and order and toughness. There is, what I tell people, and I tell my cops, we rely on the consent of the people that we serve to be successful. There's not enough cops here. If all of a sudden the American people say enough is enough, we're not going to be committed to the rule of law. We're not going to be committed to supporting law enforcement. We're not going to stand with them. We're going to go against them. There's not a thing we can do, because 800,000 cops certainly is not going to be able to control 350 million Americans. And so it isn't helpful. And unfortunately, I have always felt that I think people are watching us, especially for leaders. What are you doing in response? And unfortunately, there aren't too many chiefs that call balls and strikes, right? That when the president says something right, I'm going to say, hey, that was a good thing you did. But when he's saying things that raise the temperature, instead of cooling things down, you've got to speak up. And I think if you follow my interviews and tweets, my community knows that I speak out, and I have a mayor that supports me speaking out. So, and I do it both to the left and the right. Extremism is extremism, regardless of the political dogma that leads to extremism.
So as news outlets cover Black Lives Matter, society is striving to embrace change. What changes do police have to make to face the growing challenges of being a police officer in the Black Lives Matter era?
Well, look, the biggest mistake that I think society made when Black Lives Matter movement started, the answer to that was simply to acknowledge Black lives do matter. And Black lives have been marginalized throughout the history of our country, and to a lesser extent, but not much less, you know, Latino, Hispanic lives have been marginalized in this country. We've been demagogued and demonized, and instead of just acknowledging it, too many people started, you know, all lives matter, blue lives matter. But here's the mistake. Or if you look closely, too many of those people that are pushing the all lives matter and blue lives matter, which they're right, they do matter, but many of those people have never said or acknowledged that Black lives do matter. And they don't even realize that the silence is deafening. And so with this movement, what's happened is that there's extremists and good and bad in everything. You know, you've got the extreme elements of the movement that, you know, go around saying oink, oink, pigs must die, or, you know, we don't, look, those are extremists. Those are extremists. There's good and bad in everything. And sadly though, too many of us choose to focus on the extreme instead of on what truly Black Lives Matter is about. And that's the fact, acknowledging the history of systemic racism, lack of opportunity in terms of education, housing, economic opportunity, a lot of the things, even in school, where if you look at the fact that we truly have criminalized adolescents. You know, when I was a kid, I was a freshman in high school, a guy named Richard Quintero mentioned my mother to me, he got punched in the nose. Unfortunately, fortunately for me back then, we didn't have 100,000 cops in schools, right? So you didn't have a criminal summons or an arrest. Well, that same punch today can get you a criminal summons, it can get you an arrest, and it can lead, it's the beginning of the school to prison pipeline, because you know the rest of that story. And I really believe that law enforcement and schools should be there just for safety, not to take the place of administrators, counselors, and ultimately teachers. They should just be there to keep people safe, nothing else. So unless we address all these other systemic issues, acknowledge the disproportionality in terms of use of force, things of that nature, we will never get beyond where we're at today. Because at the end of the day, you can't be forgiven for the sin before you acknowledge it. And we have yet, too many of us, to acknowledge the sins of the present and the sins of our forefathers, and therein lies the problem.
Chief, on top of law enforcement officers' primary mission of keeping their community safe, President Trump has consistently called for the creation of a deportation force to maximize the number of immigrants that is removed from the country, and continues to propose a range of efforts that would supercharge the role of state and local law enforcement, as you know, in federal immigration enforcement, that is. Are you concerned with the civil immigration enforcement role that local law enforcement agencies have had to assume in enforcing federal immigration laws, especially because exercising that role could, and for some LEAs, have led to significant financial burdens, increased litigation, and diminished public trust, all at the expense of public safety and the general welfare of all members of our community?
Yeah, you know, I'm happy to report that most at least big city agencies, that's a civil matter, that we don't have the authority, the training, or the bandwidth. You know, I coined a phrase in in Houston, and we were going to do, some people want to do bumper stickers. At Houston PD, we chase crooks, not cooks, right? I mean, we're here focusing on keeping this community safe. Our greatest force multiplier is the community itself, right? When you have about 600,000 undocumented immigrants in a region like we do, and you create a fear, you know, there's a lot of unintended consequences. You can't, the people that live, work, or visit a city should not be afraid of the local police simply because of their immigration status. And the unintended consequences are these. We rely on the community as our greatest force multiplier to keep the community safe. I talked earlier about we rely on the consent of the people we serve. And imagine if your grandchild, your child, someone you love is waiting for the school at the school bus stop to be picked up, and a pedophile brings them into a van and takes off and kidnaps them. And the only witness is el jardinero, you know, the little nanny that everybody knows, suspects that maybe she's not documented, but, and now they are afraid to come forward. Explain to me how, from a public safety standpoint, we've made it safer for the American people, because none of us live on an island. And so we have always pushed back here in Houston. We recognize that we are here to chase crooks and not cooks. When SB 4 passed that Clemente might not know about, that's the anti-sanctuary city law. Remember that in Houston? I mean, in Texas. First of all, there was truly no sanctuary. There's no sanctuary for bad actors. What it is we're focused on looking at behavior and not going after people simply because of their status. But what we did here is that we knew it was going to have a chilling effect. Just the debate had a chilling effect. When we compared data on the reporting of sexual assaults in Houston, 17 versus 18 or 16 versus 17, I got weather on my mind and everything else, so don't hold me exactly to the years. But we saw one quarter versus first quarter of one year versus first quarter of the following year, a reduction of 42.8% in terms of the reporting of sexual assaults by Latinas and Hispanics. A man that would sexually assault a Hispanic member of the society today is going to assault somebody else tomorrow. And so again, what we did is that we made it real clear to our community, we're not interested in enforcing immigration law. We're not interested in whether or not you're here documented or undocumented. What we're interested in is if you're a witness or a victim of the crime, adelante, that we're here with at your service. So we did a lot of educational outreach, including in Spanish, including our own radio show on Facebook, on the radio here. That's called Comunidad y Confianza, every Tuesday for an hour. We do it all in Spanish. We put together the Alianza contra el Crimen, which was our bilingual town hall meetings in our immigrant pockets around the city. And so what we did is when we saw that reduction, but because we were constantly educating the community, our numbers went up in terms of people reporting. I think the trust. It's what we're all about, and it's what we're going to continue to do.
Bueno, yo creo que te voy a proponer venir acá a Chicago para ser jefe de la policía de Chicago.
Oye, hace mucho frío, ahí hay mucho frío. Muchacho, me mata el frío en Chicago.
So the next question is, how do you visualize the role of police in the future, and what have to change?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we need to make sure that if you go to the high crime neighborhoods in Chicago where people are getting shot at every day, and you say, hey, we're going to defund the police, we're going to take away 20% of your patrol officers here, you will have your lunch handed to you. Having said that, I think we need to be smart in terms of how we respond to crisis. Just about 2 weeks ago, I had to fire 4 officers who shot a young man by the name of Nicholas Chavez here that I just could not support. I couldn't see how that was justified at the end. But the truth is, we have to be smart about how we respond to people in crisis. We have to have a multidisciplinary response. Here in Houston, we have our CERT teams, which is a specially trained police officer with a mental health professional, right? The problem is, and by the way, they go to all kinds of calls, but there's only 12 teams for a city of 671 square miles, right? We have over 40,000 calls a year. We have got to put more of those teams together. We have to look at diverting people from jail to mental health facilities or treatment facilities for addiction. I had a mom and a family that we met with about 4 weeks ago. Their son had a mental health issue, and you don't know what came first, the mental illness or addiction, because they do intersect. You don't know which came first, but you know that they both play a role. This man punched a security guard, took the security guard's semi-automatic pistol. One of our sergeants finds him on a metro bus. The security guard, a guy on the bicycle shows my sergeant and the security guard. I think he went in there into the bus. Sergeant comes onto the bus with the security guard. Go, there he is. Make a long story short, we get everybody off the bus, and then when the sergeant's standing on the bus, the man gets up, tries to shoot the sergeant. Sadly, the sergeant ends up having to shoot to defend himself. This is all on video. I showed the mom and the dad of the deceased suspect, his big brother, and his big brother's wife, so his sister-in-law. Beautiful family. It broke my heart that they lost their child. You know what made that mom the most angry? Is that he had been in and out of jail. The system knows that he has these addiction / psychological issues. And she said, why did they let him out? So one of the things that was what angered her the most. I said, Mama, I said, we have failed your son as a society. I would like to see the building of more mental health facilities where we can actually, when somebody commits a lower level crime, instead of giving them a year in jail, which is not happening anymore, but let's say that they before it spirals, you put them in a facility for 6 months to a year, so you can, through medication, through a lot of counseling, hopefully get them on a path to mental wellness, to emotional wellness, and to addiction, keep getting the addiction under control, and then you transition them out. So we're actually looking at, as a police department, at trying to see how we can do civil commitments, if nothing else. Because you know where the mentally ill right now and the addicted are right now? They're on the streets. Mm-hmm. And they come in and out of the jail. And sadly, as the illness or the addiction gets worse, sometimes their actions get worse, and they end up getting themselves hurt or someone else. So we've got to rethink a lot of things, and we have to rethink our investments. But I think it's going to take much more than the police, and it's going to have to be all hands on deck for these type of things to work.
I was going to ask you something else, but you touched on public trust and whatnot. So I'm going to localize this a little bit. We have a new police chief. He happens to be African-American in Lubbock, Texas. And as a publisher, I have personally reached out and offered, hey, I have this publication that reaches 100,000 people on a monthly basis. I'm opening a door, come and connect with our Latino community. And they haven't. They've not really made a connection. And even when he was a candidate, I asked, what would you do if you became police chief? How would you connect with the Hispanic community? Oh, and his response, I have to tell you, he was like, we'll do chips and hot sauce with the chief.
Oh my God, Lord.
I was really disappointed, I have to tell you that. And we just have no relationship. What are you doing to build that public trust with the Hispanic community and really fostering relationships? And how are you including your Hispanic newspapers or Hispanic media?
Well, first of all, I'm bilingual, so it helps, and I'll tweet in Spanish. No escribo muy bien español, so as much as I should, right? Porque yo llegué aquí a los 4 años y medio from Cuba, so I don't really learn how to write Spanish as well. But now you've got me thinking about Lubbock. I'm going to reach out to that chief and tell him to get it going. No, I will. I promise you.
Tell him to call me.
Huh?
tell him to call me because I have offered on multiple occasions.
Gotcha. If not, we'll give us the column. We'll do it from here.
We're going to talk after this.
Okay. So anyway, look, you can't build relationships, and you cannot build trust, and you cannot change culture in terms of the police department from the 16th floor of headquarters in downtown Houston at 1200 Travis. You got to get out from behind your desk, and you've got to get out into the community. People need to see you because the problem is if they don't know you and you don't communicate with them, when the bad times come, and they will come, there's no policy, no training, no nothing that will prevent or bad things from happening or guarantee 100% success. That perfection doesn't exist. You know you're gonna have bad things happen. So I spend a lot of time out in the community. I go out and spend, out in the field. You go to your events, you get on the radio, you get on your television, you never say no to the media. I get beat up, quite frankly, a lot by haters, right? Oh, the Hollywood, that's Chief Hollywood. He's always on TV, he's always on the radio. They don't understand. Familiarity breeds trust. If people think they know you, and in fact, if they do know you and what you stand for, it builds trust. When I have people come up to me and say, "Oh, hey, man, jefe Arturo," and they call me by my first name, there is no greater, to me, there's no greater, honor for me than for a person to call me by my first name, a person I've never met. Because when they're calling you by the first name, that means that they think you're their friend, they know you, they feel you. When I go to restaurants or I go to an event, once we get past COVID, my wife always said, they said, you're always going and talking to everybody that's serving you, that's in the kitchen. I'll go back in the kitchen and thank people. But at the end of the day, it's about engagement. Let me just throw this out to you all. I don't talk about community policing. I talk about relational policing, because if you talk about community policing, police chiefs will say, oh, we don't have enough people. They're going from call to call. They don't get it. Every contact is the beginning of a relationship. And relational policing is about conducting yourself in a manner where you create a friend and not a foe. By conducting yourself in the manner that no matter whose job it is or what the issue is, when somebody contacts you, you come in contact with somebody, you do your very best to help them. And relational policing is about, the acronym is TREAT, T-R-E-E-A-T. And it's about transparency. You got to try to be transparent to the greatest extent possible that the law allows you to. You have to have respect for everyone you come in contact to. And I tell my cops, respect starts with self-respect, right? You got to respect your seniors in rank. You've got to respect the oath of office. You've got to respect the canons of the profession, and you've got to respect the uniform and yourself. And then you've got to engage. You know what? I'm always late because I've never met a stranger. And if somebody says hi, I always go out of my way to say hi back. You got to engage one another during the good times. So when a bad time comes, and they will come, it's not the first time people think they've known you or the first time you contact them. And then while you're engaging, you're building emotional capital that you're going to have to draw on as a leader, as an organization. And then we have to hold people accountable. Look, what people don't get, most police officers will serve 20, 30 years. They'll never shoot anybody. They'll never shoot at anybody. They'll never mistreat people, be professional. Well, here's the problem. It's not the cops, it's the chiefs. People know a bad use of force when they see it. They know brutality when they see it. And sadly, bad policing disproportionately impacts communities of color. We've got to hold people accountable. If you don't have accountability, it doesn't matter how transparent, how respectful, how much you engage, because accountability is what people are looking for. And that's a two-way street. We've got to hold each other accountable. And so if you're transparent, engage in a respectful manner, engage people, to build emotional capital, hold each other accountable, we are going to build trust. And trust is really the commodity that we rely on. That's why we tell the Latino community, we chase crooks, not cooks. That's why we tell them, adelante, aquí estamos a sus órdenes, because it's that trust that we're going to need. And so relational policing is what we engage in. I think that as the police chief, we set the tone for the rest of the organization. Our people can see the benefits. When we had the big protests here, I didn't sit at headquarters watching them on the monitor. I was out by myself in large crowds, surrounded by thousands of people, sometimes very angry people, but to be able to show that empathy, to listen, to feel the pain, to cry with folks, that's about as transparent as it gets. And that really got us a lot of emotional capital, not to mention the fact that it sent a really good, I think, a really good vision for what the officers should be understanding, that people just want to be heard. They don't hate us. They want to be heard. They want to know that we are empathetic. And I think it was a good example of what relational policing is about.
As police chief, you have responded to national leaders in a way that we have not seen before. You said to Trump, please keep your mouth shut if you can't be contracted.
I dare say be quiet, didn't I?
What did you say that, and what was the feedback?
Well, look, leadership is about being impactful for the right reasons, not being impactful for the wrong reasons. Y tú sabes, my dad used to say que los cubanos dicen no tienes pelo en la lengua, right? So you ever heard that? That's a big, one of our little sayings. I think that the problem is in society that too many people are more focused on keeping their job than doing their job. I'm a person of faith. And the day I don't have this job, I'll find another job. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'll sell ice cream. I don't care. I know I'm not going to go hungry as long as I have my health. And so, again, people are watching. They're watching us as leaders. They're watching us as people that are supposed to be serving the greater good. And, you know, when it was interesting that when the president said you should rough them up, you know, I was one of the few chiefs that tweeted at him, no, Mr. President, we don't rough people up. That's not what we do. And I think the reason you have to do that is, number one, your employees that you lead, your officers that you lead, need to know that it's not okay what the president's saying. By the way, they don't work for the president, they work for me, okay? And like I said, this is only one chief in Houston, and that's me. Number two, it's important to speak up because the community is watching. This is my chief. We've got the chief executive in the country saying it's okay to do this, to dominate. We're not going to dominate the streets. You know what we're going to do? We're going to protect and defend and keep people safe to exercise their First Amendment rights. But like I always say, do not confuse kindness with weakness. We're not going to tolerate. There's a distinct line between First Amendment and criminal activity. We will make arrests if criminal activity occurs. But at the end of the day, if you don't speak up, I think you lose a lot of credibility, and you build a lot of emotional capital when you do the right thing for the right reasons. And people know right when they see it, and they know wrong when they see it.
Chief, let me read this to you real quick. It goes like this. Trust between law enforcement agencies and the people they protect and serve is essential in a democracy. It is key to the stability of our communities, the integrity of our criminal justice system, and the safe and effective delivery of policing services. And this is a quote by the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, and that was in 2015. Mm-hmm. What say you as a Latino police chief in a major metropolitan city whose voice is significant from a local to national front? And what say you to other police chiefs and police on a national scale?
We need to speak out.
Mm-hmm.
We got to speak up because, you know, unfortunately, the silence is deafening, right? I mean, people are watching us to see what we do, what we don't do, what we say. And, you know, I'm privileged to, I think that as the president of the major city chiefs, you know, police chiefs are in a really tough spot. We're going to lose about 18 of the 69 police chiefs in big cities this year. We're up to 18. We've lost good progressive reformers like, Carmen Best in Seattle, a dear friend. We lost Erica Shields, another friend in Atlanta. And so when you do speak up, you do so at great peril to yourself. So I'm grateful that my colleagues at Major City Chiefs actually made me their president, because I've been blessed that I've always said what's on my mind. I've been a police chief now in 2 cities for 13 years. Most big city police chiefs are lasting on average 3 years, which what politicians don't get is that when you have that revolving chair, you have no continuity of leadership, no continuity of direction. You don't have that stability. And the problem with that is, guess who ends up running the department? The unions and everyone else, because unfortunately there's no one there to keep the ball moving. So I would just say to the chiefs, don't worry about keeping your job, just worry about doing your job, because what we do is too important for us to focus on keeping it instead of doing it. And I think that goes beyond policing. It goes to politicians that only care about what the base of their respective parties care about. And because I think that both bases are out of touch with the majority of Americans. We're pragmatic people. Life's about give and take. You know, life isn't Burger King. When you get it, you always get to have it your way, right? And so I would say speak up. And if you can't speak up, join organizations like Major City Chiefs that you can use for cover, and we can do the speaking for you.
Awesome.
So I have a more question for you. The crimes have been growing in New York, Chicago, different major cities. The president say, okay, I'm gonna send you federal troops for different cities. Some city like Chicago say, I don't want it. So what do you think about it? Do you think that is a good strategy, or do you think that we need to have a national strategy to face this issue?
Yeah, I think that it depends. Like I always tell my federal partners, we work very closely with our federal partners, because, you know, political theater is here, and when the road, the rubber meets the road, and the operators are actually working, we don't focus on political theater. We focus on safety. And so what I always tell my federal partners, if we're going to work together like we've been working together, are we going to work on what's important to my community and this police department, or are we going to work on what's important to you? So if it's thoughtful, if it's well planned, and if it's focused on the priorities of a community, because part of the problem is that every community has its own, you know, it's not one size fits all, right? We have all these cities, and every community has their own priorities, their own thresholds, their own their own gauges for how much they're willing to do or not do, and so on and so forth. So I think that if the federal partners come in, it's really important for them to take their cues from the local chiefs that are more in touch with what's going on, if they're doing their job, what's going on with the community. And so if it's done right, it's very helpful. But if it's going to be done with nothing but political theater, then we're not interested.
Chief, we have some questions out there. Plus, everybody now wants you to do a column for their newspapers. So that's
okay, great.
This comes from Juan Esparza Loera, and he says, in recent months, there's been a pushback against having police officers at schools. Good or bad? How does it work in Houston? And what's the best policing practice for schools to follow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of hit it earlier. Look, one of my assistant chiefs just became the police chief for the Houston Independent School District. Great guy, Pedro Lopez. He was born and raised, he's a New York Rican, raised in, I think, the Bronx. And it depends. It depends on how the police officers are used. I believe that if we go back in time, I don't know why academia hasn't done this. I can't find a good report. We did not used to have school police officers in this country. And when I was a kid, I don't remember the dropout rates in communities of color that we have today compared to what we had. And I believe that if we studied this problem, if this is the dropout rate, right, and this with no school district police, as we introduce more and more cops into the school environment, the dropout rate went up. I really believe that. And that's because in too many places, the school district police took the place of the counselors, of the administrators, and of the teachers. As long as, I strongly believe in an era of active shooters where we know that that these things go on almost every year at a school in our country. We need to have police officers, but they need to be there only for safety and security and not to criminalize adolescent behavior.
Chief, at this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do some closing comments. First of all, we want to thank you so much. And I'm going to let my esteemed colleague, Clemente, to go ahead and get started.
Okay, so the Black Lives Matter movement have changed this country in a good way, I think. We are more aware of what's been happening with the most vulnerable people, in particular with the African-American community. So we have to change, and the police have to lead these changes. This is the challenge. I think that the change is possible because not all police are like those who killed George Floyd. We are fortunate that we have police officers like Arturo Acevedo, Cubano, to lead these changes. Gracias very much for sharing your experience with us today. Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias, Clemente.
And as someone who is an advocate for the Latino community like myself, as well as local law enforcement, my hope is that we overcome the negative consequences of entangling local policing and law enforcement when directly dealing with the Latino community. I remind you that Latino men face police brutality second to Black men.
Yep.
Also, 68% of Latinos fear police will use excessive force on them. And Hispanics and Hispanic men are more likely to be fatally shot second to Black men. In this broken system, we don't want to just empathize. We identify with the Black community, but we remind our leaders and law enforcement that solidarity goes two ways. Your fight is our fight. And I pray that law enforcement and those they serve will always be a relationship of necessary respect and value. And Chief, before we go off to the next segment, I want to make sure that I get a picture with you. You know, so I'm going to do that real quick. And
yo voy a tener dos preguntas antes de que se vaya el Chief.
Déjame peinarme bien.
okay, let me get my picture ready on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you again so very much.
Thank you all.
So, Chief Acevedo, yo, bueno, no lo pude conocer mucho al principio, nomás hice la introducción, pero yo soy Fanny Miller, yo estoy en San Diego, California, y soy colombiana y publico un periódico también, un semanario aquí por los últimos 32 años.
Wow.
Mi pregunta es, dos preguntas tengo. Primero, ¿qué nos recomienda o qué le gustaría ver a usted de nosotros, los medios de comunicación, sobre todo los periódicos que estamos en las comunidades que ustedes sirven, para que ayudemos a que haya más confianza en las policías? ¿Qué es lo que podemos hacer? Porque, regularmente lo que damos a conocer, pues siempre son las cosas malas, ¿no? Cuando se arrestan, pero también tenemos... también tenemos una responsabilidad de hacer lo bueno, pero ¿qué es lo que usted nos recomendaría a nosotros como medios de comunicación?
Bueno, tiene que tener la comunicación tiene que seguir. Es muy importante que tengan cualquier departamento policíaco que respeten a la comunidad hispana, a la comunidad latina. Al fin del día, el problema con los latinos es que we're too chill, you know what I'm saying? We don't demand action. No demandamos el respeto, no demandamos que nos den a nosotros las oportunidades que le dan a otras comunidades. Y al fin del día, la prensa hispana, latina, tiene que llevar a cuenta los departamentos policíacos para asegurar que están comunicando con todas las partes de la comunidad, no solamente con el que habla inglés. Por eso yo estoy muy orgulloso con mi alcalde, Sylvester Turner, me trajo aquí y me trajo también a Sam Peña, que los dos, el jefe de los bomberos, los dos hacemos nuestra conferencia de prensa en inglés y en español, porque tienen intérprete en muchos lugares, ¿ok? Para el American Sign Language, pero tienen 40% de hispanos, latinos que trabajan, que pagan su impuesto, que pagan tus taxes y no tienen nada para ello. Así que al fin del día, si la prensa hispana tiene que estar seguro que estamos representando todo y demandando los derechos también y el servicio a todas las comunidades, especialmente también a nuestra comunidad, la comunidad hispana.
Muchas gracias. Y la otra pregunta es un poco más personal y un comentario. Yo tengo 3 hombres jóvenes y uno de ellos está interesado en llegar a ser policía, ¿no? Pero, ¿qué nos recomienda? ¿Qué le recomienda nosotros a las mamás que vemos tantas cosas negativas de los departamentos, pero cómo apoyarlos y también qué hacemos para que más latinos entren y lleguen a ser como usted?
Darle fuerza, dile adelante, aquí estamos. Mira, si este niño que llegó aquí a los 4 años y medio sin hablar una palabra en inglés, puede llegar a ser el jefe de la policía en la ciudad más grande de Texas y creo que vamos a ser la tercera más grande del país y el presidente de la Asociación de Departamentos Policíacos Mayores en este país. Si yo puedo llegar a esto y también el hijo de un africano puede llegar a presidente, ellos pueden llegar a cualquier puesto que quieren hacer trabajo. Así que no tengan temor, que caminen con Dios, como decía mi mamá. No tienen que tener miedo a nada y a nadie. Así que es una carrera muy linda. Me encanta ser policía. Llevo 34 años haciendo este trabajo. Dejé la escuela de ley, law school, y nunca miraba para atrás. Así que aquí estamos. And then I send everybody mi email address. El que necesita más información, que me llamen. Y también que terminen los estudios, porque es muy importante tener tu educación formal. Y cuando terminen los estudios, adelante, aquí estamos, lo voy a estar esperando a tu hijo. ¿Cuántos años tiene?
Ahorita tiene 20.
Oye, dile que venga para acá, que tenemos trabajo para él.
Tiene 20, sí, ya está estudiando, desde los 16 años hasta en el college. Entonces ahí ha trabajado. Pero muchas gracias, realmente usted es una gran inspiración. Muchas gracias por su tiempo, muchas gracias por todos los consejos y por abrirnos la puerta realmente al sistema policíaco de este país y por todos sus comentarios.
Gracias.
Vamos a estar en comunicación por seguro.
Lo que necesitan, aquí estamos a sus órdenes.
Bueno.
Muchas gracias, Chief Acevedo.
Cuídense.
Gracias.
Bye-bye. Thank you all. Bye-bye.